Hello, welcome to Venture Capital with me, Katie Pilbeam. This week, another historic trade deal was sealed. This time, Russia secured relations with historic partners. Plus, Ukraine was given another chance to avoid a gas cut-off. Corporate news to come, and Tim Kirby continues to spin the so far extremely lucky wheel. So, Ukraine officials were in Germany this week in a plan orchestrated by Russia and the EU to sort out the $2.5 billion that is still owed to Gazprom in unpaid bills. Ukraine depends on Russia for about half of its gas. Russia supplies around a third of Europe's gas demand, and about half of its gas imports from Russia flow through Ukraine. Thus, the intention of the meeting was to avoid a cut-off for Kiev and gas shortages for Europe. Now, our Berlin-based correspondent Peter Oliver witnessed the proceedings.
The latest round of trilateral talks to decide how Ukraine is going to pay off its gas debt to Russia has ended with all three sides saying that positive steps had been made, but still a solid solution seems to elude them. It does seem that these talks are going to continue on Monday in Brussels. This is after talks on Friday ended with a interesting statement from the Ukrainian side. Basically, they put forward a pledge of nearly $500 million to say as a goodwill gesture to pay off some of their debt, to try and convince Gazprom that they were serious, and convince the Russian side that they were serious about this. Now, this all took a little turn after the money didn't show up in Gazprom's account at the time it should have done. The Ukrainian energy minister appeared in front of journalists and essentially told them that the check was in the post. Now, we heard from the EU representative, the EU Energy Commissioner, Mr. Oettinger, who said that this was all due to a series of bank transfers, and he seemed quite bemused about what had gone on. Basically, the money had left an account in Kiev, gone to New York, and then from New York being transferred to Moscow. However, the money hadn't arrived in the bank account in Moscow in time for the required paperwork to be done, so that Gazprom could look at it and say, yes, that money's definitely in our account. Now, from the Russian side, we heard from Mr. Novak, the Russian energy minister. He said that, OK, we don't have the required paperwork. However, as a goodwill gesture, we're willing to take the Ukrainian side's word as their bond that it was transferred. And as long as that money shows up by 2 p.m. European time on Monday, then talks would continue in Brussels. Now, with regards to what they're discussing at the moment, they're still quite poles apart when it comes to some of the major issues about just how much Ukraine will have to pay for gas in the future and how much they're going to have to pay for the gas that they've already used. Let's remember that since February, Ukraine haven't paid 1 cent for the gas that they've been using. This is, of course, if any private consumer was to do that, they'd be facing some quite serious problems from their provider. So imagine that on a national scale. So there's no wonder that Mr. Prodan, the Ukrainian energy minister, looked a little worried as he sat there and said, don't worry, we've just had to transfer a few funds around and move them from one account to the other, and trust us, it'll all be fine. But it seems like these talks are going to continue in Brussels. It's ended here in Berlin, as I say, with them saying, we've made progress, we've agreed on certain things, but we still haven't got a firm solution about how Ukraine are going to pay the billions of dollars that they owe in back gas bills.
Going forward, Kiev is still banking on getting their Russian gas from Europe. I'm talking about reverse supplies from Europe that were originally delivered from Russia. So, is this feasible? Is this legal? Is it cost effective? Well, I asked Konstantin Simonov from the Federal Energy Security Fund here in Moscow.
Reverse gas is still Russian gas. If Ukraine will not pay the debt for the first quarter, Russia will stop the supply of gas to Ukraine. Then in autumn, Ukraine will begin to stall gas from the export amount. Then Russia will stop transit of gas through Ukraine to Europe. That is why it's very possible scenario that in autumn and winter there will be no supply of Ukraine and there will be no transit of gas through Ukraine.
A new Eurasian Economic Union was set up this week by the leaders of Russia, Kazakhstan and Belarus. The ex-Soviet neighbours will now enjoy the free movement of goods, capital and services, as well as the free movement of people, 170 million people in total. And trade is set to accelerate in industries such as energy, agriculture and transport. So I'm now joined by David Gray from PwC for more on the significance of this deal and its potential. OK, so Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan, three diverse economies. Can it work?
I think it can work. I think the important thing is that if we have open borders and trade unions, countries can do what they're best at. And I do think the fact that there is a diversity in the region is actually one of the strengths of the region. And I'm looking forward to the increased opportunities, the additional trade flows that will come from a reduction in obstacles to trade. So yes, I do think it can work.
And do you think that this new union could mimic what happened in the EU? They saw trade accelerate because of barriers being taken down. Do you think it could experience the same positives?
I very much hope so. I think wherever you reduce barriers to trade, business will find a way of increasing.
And what about Europe then? Because at the moment, Europe is Russia's biggest trading partner. Will that remain so?
I think it's not the case that we should think about this as something that's going to reduce trade with Europe. I think wherever trade barriers come down, they actually encourage trade, but I still think there will be very strong links into Europe because of the size of the relative markets. Europe is still going to be, for Russia, very important, and Russia is still going to be very important, and indeed the rest of the Eurasia region for Europe.
And what about the Russian economy then? Because we know that growth has been reduced for this year. What does it mean for Russia?
I think it means more opportunity. We have seen a drop in the rate of growth of the Russian economy, and I think the administration, Mr. Putin and others, have talked about some of the structural issues that the Russian economy faces. I think this trade pact, opening up the custom union, will actually promote trade, so that will be a positive. Whether that will be sufficient to outweigh other factors that are happening in the wider economy, that is open for debate. Personally, I think that growth should pick up later in the year, and we should see some growth in the Russian economy accelerating even before the 1st of January, when the Eurasia Union will kick off.
What about the wider implications? Because as we know, Russia has been accelerating trade with China quite dramatically. We've got the Eurasian Union now going forward. What do you think Mr. Putin is up to?
I think we are looking at diversifying the economy, and that's in terms of the contents of the economy, but also in terms of our trading relations. And Mr. Nazarbayev highlighted the importance that this union will have in terms of increasing the amount of interaction. It's not the question that it's replacing something, it's a question that it increases the gross amount of trade and the gross amount of business and supports growth. So I do think Russia is sensible to look at its trading partners and to have good trading relations in all directions. Mr. Nazarbayev talked about the pact being a bridge between East and West, and I think that's a very important point. It's not about just turning in one direction, it's about taking advantage of the strategic position that the Union has as a bridge between East and West.
OK, David Gray, we'll leave it there. Always a pleasure talking to us from central Moscow right there. And talking to Belarus, the country's leader, Alexander Lukashenko, otherwise known as Europe's last remaining dictator, is planning to bring back serfdom. Now, this would make it illegal for farm labourers to quit their jobs. His aim is to stop urban migration. Now, the controversial president said it would teach the peasants to work more efficiently. And governors who failed to ensure a fruitful harvest would get the sack. If signed, it would be violating the 1957 International Convention on the Abolition of Forced Labour. But that didn't stop him adopting a law in 2012, stopping timber industry workers from quitting their jobs. And I suspect it it won't stop him now, but I'm going to be watching that one because it's bizarre. All right, let's talk about corporate news. These are the stories that have been catching my eye in the markets this week. Russian automaker Avtovaz will reportedly fire 50% of its foreign specialists by the end of this year. There's around 20 foreigners working at the company. They're usually employed to share the experience of Renault Nissan before returning to the alliance's firms. Aeroflot's new budget airline, Jobalet, is to start flights to Crimea at a cost of $60 for a return. Within 24 hours of going on sale, 4,000 tickets had been snapped up. The first flight is scheduled on June 11th. Russia's second biggest mobile phone operator, Megafon, has reported first quarter net profit fell 43% from a year ago. A weaker ruble and depreciation costs relating to last year's acquisition of Skartel are to blame. The company is owned by Russia's richest man, Alisher Usmanov. All right, let's get over to the business desk and talk to Mr. Tim Kirby, because I was away last week, I was in Shanghai, and you did rather well in my absence. What's happened since? It was Uralkali, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, Russia's largest fertilizer producer went down a little bit, 3.5%, so I lost $600, but my faith in the wheel is not shaken because we're still up $6,000 from our original $10,000 that we started with. So let's see what we're going to invest in this week. Come on, wheel. Let's see. We're going for United Aircraft Corporation. This is an interesting one because they basically took all of the various aircraft companies from the Soviet Union and merged them into one. But the thing is, Russian aviation is not very popular outside of Russia, so we'll see if this one pays off or not.
We'll see if it flies or dies. Or
well
crashes
said.
and burns. Ooh,
I think it might be the
okay.
latter, unfortunately.
Oh, come on, confidence. Mr. Lucky so far. Okay, you've lost, what, $600? But you're
That's
still up
nothing.
around 6,000. That's not bad. All right, Tim Kirby, well done. Good luck. See you next week. Now, it's common knowledge that Russians enjoy a drink or two. And now it's official. According to the latest survey by Euromonitor International, Russians ranked second in the amount of money spent on booze last year. The first, Estonia. Belarus, Peru, Latvia and Lithuania also spend a generous amount of cash on alcohol. And if you're thinking vodka is the drink of choice for Russians, well, you would be wrong. It's actually beer. So, I'm going to go. The show's done, and I'm going to go get myself a drink. I think I'm going to get some wine. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.